Welcome, new Templars. I'm D.S.M.P, aka A145, the map maker. And we got a lot to cover tonight in this video, a lot of kind of random topics. Not a huge standout boom this week, but the movement seeming very divided. The first thing we're going to talk about in this video is that MAGA is dead is trending on Twitter. And I'm a little bit shocked when I look on Twitter these days, especially today and the past few days. So many turncoats, so many people questioning the Maestro. And like, I hate to have this channel just be like defending the Maestro every video, because I don't even necessarily agree or understand everything he does, but there seems to be quite a divide in the truth movement. Some of these people questioning him are definitely what you would call truthers. Even a lot of them are people associated with the Reawaken America tour and other more mainstream names like Candace Owens, Ian Carroll. Obviously, Nick Fuentes is sort of leading this MAGA is dead parade. But we're going to get to that in a little more detail first in a second here. But just to go over the other subjects for tonight, talking about the launch of ISO 20022 and just a little bit of crypto news. The ending of the shutdown, which I just learned today, is going to include potentially a ban on Delta 8, which has been legal ever since the Farm Bill in 2018, which was a big win for us cannabis enthusiasts back in 2018. And this is a little something that Mitch McConnell slipped in there on the final version of this bill to end the government shutdown. So that is a little bit disappointing, but we'll look at that in a little more detail. And maybe it can be avoided, maybe not. Either way, cannabis is legal now in Ohio. So if we have to switch from Delta 8 to regular cannabis, it's not that big a deal. But we're talking about a few little words in this government shutdown ending bill, government funding bill, that could literally destroy a 30 some odd billion dollar industry that's been created since 2018. So that's not very good for we the people. And then talking about a win for the LGBs in the Supreme Court with the marriage thing being upheld, and going into a little deeper on that, on the gay mafia, which is not a subject too many people talk about, but I'm going to go into it in some detail in this video, and also addressing some concerns I have that I've seen within the Q movement and the truther channels that I watch of some little Inquisition-style homophobia coming through that I'm not a huge fan of. And so if we're going to criticize anything, let's look at what's really going on here. The gay mafia is a lot more powerful than most people understand. And then, of course, we're going to talk about ZOHRAN and his big win last week in the mayoral election in New York. New York now has a Democrat socialist Muslim mayor, well, starting January 1st, that most people on the right are calling just straight up communist. And we're going to look also at Trump's meeting with the president of Syria and what that means, and why that has become another one of the talking points of the MAGA is dead parade. And lastly, some of these items happened more like last week or late last week, which I didn't get to in my video last week, but we're going to look a little bit at what happened in the Ozempic press conference with Trump, because I've been wanting to analyze that ever since it happened. And there was just a very unusual day in the Oval Office, shall we say. So that will be the itinerary for this video. Obviously, yeah, like it is a lot of kind of random points, but we're going to try to get through it probably within an hour, as we usually do. And so starting off with MAGA is dead and talking about this new term that people are calling the panicins. So people panicking over the progress and the state of the MAGA movement. And so we have, this is like the perfect image to encapsulate it. And when I searched for MAGA is dead on Twitter, I got this saying that MAGA base declares the movement dead after Trump's H-1B visa defense, Epstein emails, and Netanyahu pardon plea. And so all three of those things pretty much happened today. I think it was Trump's interview with Lindsey Ingram that came out last night, where he has some choice quotes about the H-1B visa that America First people are having a problem with, as well as having a problem with his idea. I don't know if it was his idea or Howard Lutnick's idea, but to have 50-year mortgages. People are saying that, you know, this is just, you'll own nothing and be happy, wrapped in a new pretty bow of calling it a 50-year mortgage. You know, essentially you'll never own your house with this new plan, and probably the banks will make even more money than with a 30-year mortgage. And then, of course, the letter to Bibi, which we'll pull up here in a minute. But, you know, from my perspective, usually when it's something that looks bad on the surface, you usually have to look a little bit deeper, or just try to think about, like, well, what's going to be the reaction to this, to understand that it's not necessarily something to panic over. And, you know, the trend that I'm noticing of people that are panicking and being turncoats is that it's people that call themselves truthers, but essentially ignore the Q operation and ignore the concept that we have had a military government, continuity of government ever since, I guess, you know, perhaps it would be like the declaration of national emergency during COVID, or perhaps the declaration of insurrection on January 6th, 2021. So it's like people that don't take in the full perspective seem to be more likely to panic and not understand these jujitsu moves that Trump is making. And now I'm not being paid to defend Trump here. This is just honestly what I perceive from having analyzed everything for my whole life, but especially for the past 8 years, and especially since the Q movement, and, you know, understanding the plan that Q laid out, and with people that have come forward that help us understand this plan. You know, I'll say specifically like Derek Johnson, SG Anon, even Dave from News Treason. I think, I'm not sure if some of these people have been sent by the military to explain these things, but, you know, what they have said has really made sense and puts things in a very different perspective to understand that, you know, this was not a normal 4-year election. Trump is not just running the normal Rhino Republican program, that there is a very deep level of warfare happening, spiritual warfare even as well. But, you know, a war against the deep state to change our country in a fundamental way, you know, possibly even going back to the Republic as opposed to, you know, the U.S. corporation since 1871. So let's look at, I'm not saying I liked this post, but this post by Ann Vandersteel kind of laid out a lot of the gripes that these panicans are having. And of course, Ann Vandersteel herself is a very well-respected influencer in this movement and has been, you know, pro-Trump, pro-MAGA since I've heard of her. She did have a career before I first saw her on like Charlie's Angels. But she kind of lays out what a lot of these people are griping about, you know, talking about, she's like writing a letter to Trump as a concerned citizen that the administration has gone off the rails. In recent weeks, you've hosted the Pfizer vax profiteer Albert Bourla in the White House twice, made a landmark drug pricing deal that reeks of big pharma backroom handshakes, flooded the airways with Ozempic ads, welcomed mass murdering al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Sharaa, the interim president of Syria, which we're going to talk about in more detail later. Floated a 50-year mortgage plan to fix housing affordability, which people don't like. Slapped a $100,000 fee on H-1B visas to protect Americans, then caved to big tech lawsuits. Flooding jobs with cheap foreign labor again. And then she's mentioning like Tina Peters is still in prison, Oath Keepers and Proud Boys are still in prison, saying Trump, something has gone horribly wrong in the Oval Office. You're not draining the swamp, you're restocking it. This is your wake-up call from 77 million MAGA voters. Get back to fighting for us or the elites win again. So that's her opinion. You know, some of those things, like I said, like concerned me when I first saw them. But when you really think about it, you know, Trump is, you know, we know his strategy of putting dirtbags in the spotlight, sometimes even sitting next to them, and even like putting his arm around them, saying like, we wish her well, like just laying in prison. But at the same time, you know, that has the effect of creating a Twitter storm of anger around that individual. And Trump takes the slings and arrows of having been associated with that person to essentially further destroy their own reputation, which actually hurts his reputation too. And so I think Trump needs to be maybe a little bit more careful. I mean, I can't say that this strategy is working to expose the dirtbags, but it's also in a way progressively harming his own reputation. And so, you know, I see it in a way as very much like a Jesus Christ story. You know, he's bearing the cross, and in the end, you know, he'll say like, forgive them, Father. But hopefully it won't be an end like Jesus Christ of Trump being crucified. And so I think this was a reply to Ann Vandersteel's tweet from Joe M saying like there could be two snakes in his proximity. And like, I was just surprised by this because like, this is Joe M, I think. I mean, it could be anyone, just says Joe M. But like Joe M, I believe, was the one who made that original, like several of those like most famous QAnon sort of like promo conglomeration clips, some of the best little Q short videos that were out there. And here's another one that's questioning the plan. I don't even know who this is, but he's again, you know, making like these lists of grievances that people have with the Trump agenda as of late, talking about, when I become your president, I will create 50-year mortgages, 15-year car loans, bring in 600,000 Chinese students, tell Americans we need H-1B visas because there's no talent here, and protect the Epstein files so no pedophiles are brought to justice. So essentially like saying if he had campaigned on things that are actually happening now, he probably would not have been elected. And so this was another big question mark thing from today about Trump actually sent a letter to the president of Israel requesting a pardon for the prime minister. And now this is the picture of this letter that's circulating online. Like, I have no idea why it's this strange sepia tone. I mean, some of this stuff, I wonder if it's even real or not. But this, you know, it essentially like requests a pardon for Bibi Netanyahu. And I read a long RT article about this. Here's another person, another frustrated former MAGA person, I guess, saying Trump's going to lose the House and get impeached in 2027, and I'm not going to lift a finger to defend him. You did nothing you promised to do and dedicated your entire second term to donor class. You're on your own now. Good luck. So, you know, of course, I don't agree with sending Bibi Netanyahu or sending a letter requesting Bibi Netanyahu's pardon. I will say, however, that the charges he's facing in Israel are, I would say, the least serious charges in the world that he's facing. You know, he's looking at genocide charges from the ICC, and he has arrest warrants in many other countries in Europe. Now, once ZOHRAN Mamdani is in New York, he may be arrested even if he visits New York or visits the UN. So he has much bigger problems than his little internal corruption case. And, you know, I was thinking about this, and actually it started making a lot more sense to me with actually reading the very first comment, which was actually on the RT article, which was this from Firefly 101, which I found very insightful, saying Trump is desperate for them to pardon Bibi because he knows that if Bibi does not get a pardon, he's going to attack Iran again and will draw the U.S. into it, since this is his only way to stay in power and avoid trial. And since Trump cannot seem to say no to Israel, he is trying to prevent Bibi from going to war with Iran. Carter wonder back in the 70s of the then Prime Minister of Israel was insane. I think the same applies for Trump with Bibi. Well, I'll add, not only with Iran, but with Gaza too. Trump is trying to have that Gaza peace accord, have peace in Gaza, peace in the Middle East, essentially. And I think that comment's very accurate, that, a lot of people have said that Bibi was continuing the war in Gaza to prevent his corruption trials from going forward. And so if the Knesset or the whoever's putting those charges against him, if the president would pardon those charges, it could be one path to peace in the Middle East, to not prevent, but to dissuade Israel from attacking Gaza or Iran again. So that might be the actual reason for this letter, is Trump trying to prevent Israel from starting more wars with other countries so that these trials would be postponed again. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And that's very 5D chess thinking. It's like Trump doesn't necessarily think Bibi Netanyahu's innocent. He's just trying to prevent more war and death and bloodshed. And so it's like, it's not a lie, but it's using diplomacy to prevent wars, and maybe not necessarily stating his feelings about it, but doing what needs to be done to prevent war. And I think once we're far enough away from some of these potentially hot conflicts is when Bibi might really see justice, or it may come by surprise from somewhere of a higher level other than Israel, like the ICC, the International Criminal Court, or any of these other countries that have said they'll arrest him for genocide charges. And so this isn't like Bibi gets to run free and go die of old age, but I mean, that seems to be what's happening to a lot of these deep staters. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's really going to be satisfied if Bibi just gets removed from the presidency and gets maybe a few years in prison and a slap on the wrist for receiving cigars from a foreign leader. Like his internal Israel corruption charges are pretty trivial, if you ask me, compared to what he's actually responsible for, including going back to potentially playing a hand in orchestrating 9/11 and the Mossad involvement in that. And so we want to get Bibi on the big ones. And at the end of the day, these little corruption trials in Israel aren't really what we want to see him got for. And also came back into the news today, I guess I didn't even look at any of the articles, but more Epstein letters, which in my opinion could be completely fake. It's like when you see a typed out email coming out that's 10 years old, they've had plenty of time to release it previously, for one thing, and plenty of time to fabricate these things for another thing. So I'm not concerned about the Epstein stuff. I think, we're working our way up to bigger and bigger arrests and acclimating the public and getting the public to actually demand these things. Now, a lot of the public wants to see Trump on the Epstein list and Trump go down for crimes against children, but they'll have a little surprise when it's all of their favorite celebrities. And so I think that this strategy of withholding the files is actually becoming quite effective, of creating this public clamor for files to be released. And it's not like Trump trying to go after his political enemies. It's like the public has been demanding this for so long. Well, here they are. Here's who's guilty. And guess what? They've already been arrested and executed, or we'll see some kind of a reenactment of it. So, those are the panicans. That's the MAGA is dead theory. I'm not buying it. I'm still on board. There's things that maybe I would like to see happening differently, but I understand that the Maestro has a much deeper database of actual facts and knowledge than any of us do, knowing what's going on behind the scenes, and also his understanding his jujitsu strategies, his 5D chess, his bringing topics into the light to let the public be the ones who expose these things, as opposed to him just, teaching people all these conspiracies. He's turning the entire world and even the left into conspiracy theorists, trying to decode what he's doing and putting these subjects in the spotlight. And once again, like, all of these people who are turning on him are questionable in themselves. These very mainstream like truthers. I mean, Nick Fuentes, we don't need to go over him again, but like Candace Owens, Ian Carroll. Even I've seen Tom Renz, who I think was a lawyer that worked on COVID case. I'm not sure if he worked on election stuff, but I was surprised to see him, publicly taking like words against this Trump administration and their strategies. But pay attention to who's being a turncoat. And, the ones that are not being a turncoat is everyone that has been paying attention to the Q narrative since 2018. No one that followed the Q information and, continually reported on it is turning on Trump at this point, except for Dustin Nemos, of course. Like, he's been turned on Trump for a long time. But it's like, when you understand there's a deeper plan at play and it's not everything that's just on the surface level, you can usually suss out the actual motive behind some of these things that are happening. And so we'll suss those out as we go through this video as well. I'm going to get more into the Syrian president, more into the Ozempic press conference and such. So in the crypto space, as I've said in some previous videos, we've been waiting for the government shutdown to end to see a lot of the XRP ETFs approved by the SEC. That seems to be beginning, and now I've seen a couple mixed messages on this, but apparently like one has already happened with the XRP ETF, the Canary XRP ETF. Now, I'm not even exactly sure what that means, but I guess that maybe that's a trading platform that you can now like trade an XRP ETF on there. And I believe this is an actual photo of like this ETF being launched on the NASDAQ. So like, this is saying the ETF has received official SEC approval for listing on NASDAQ, the first ever XRP ETF in history. And there are several more of those coming down the pipe. I believe that means like XRP being listed as an ETF on like several different exchanges or brokerages. So that's bullish news. We haven't seen much price action yet, but the other big points coming up will be the passing of the Clarity Act. Similarly to how when the Genius Act passed in July, we expect that the Clarity Act passing Congress, which is now back in session, will have a price volatility effect upward, hopefully, for a lot of the cryptos, Bitcoins, and altcoins. And so there is a big date coming up. I've seen other supposedly big dates even before this. Could just be within like a few days from now. But one of the other big ones coming up is the ISO 20022 migration is going to be finalized on November 22nd this year, 2025. ISO 20022 goes live. SWIFT retires MT messages mandating ISO 20022 for all cross-border payments. Richer data, faster settlements, XRP, XLM, Quant, Algo, HBAR, IOTA, XDC, ADA are architecturally aligned for seamless integration. So I figured out the reason why I was a little bit confused thinking that this had maybe already happened is that we have been in a like migration period. So the ISO 20022 protocol for international monetary transfer became active, I believe, like possibly even a few years ago, but there has been the old system and the new system running in parallel since that time. And November 22nd coming up is going to be when that old system is going to be fully retired, and it's going to be ISO 20022 mandatory for all of these monetary transfers international. So will we see price action or not? I'm not sure. But either way, it's like solidifying this new digital standard for transfers. And, you know, there's a lot of different reasons to be bullish, essentially. From the...
Could you try again?
Siri's trying to jump on the video. You know, from the Clarity Act passing to these ETFs to the ISO 20022, it's like we have three major reasons to see a pump. And so I would be surprised if we don't see another pump before the end of this year, and possibly even like an exponential one. So I'm holding, and we'll just have to see what happens. And even if it doesn't happen before this year, you know, I'm still bullish on all the cryptos you see on the screen here right now. This is essentially what my own portfolio looks like in the crypto space. Also invested in metals. So moving on to the ending of the government shutdown and how this will potentially affect the hemp industry and these 𝕯𝖚𝖚 products, as well as THCA and all these hemp-derived cannabis products that have flooded the markets since 2018 with the Farm Act that Trump was largely given credit for. Well, the government shutdown ending was sort of locked in about 2 days ago, and people were saying it had biblical implications because it was 40 days and 40 nights. Now, since it was pretty much decided that it was going to end, it's actually been 43 days. So everyone that was saying 40 days and 40 nights is biblical, like, is not exactly like lining up, but close enough. They finally came to an agreement. A few Democrats flipped over from vetoing these bills to reopen the government. Schumer did not get his way. He did not get health care for illegal immigrants. And so the whole shutdown was essentially meaningless in terms of them trying to get what they wanted. A lot of people in the truth movement think that this may have been done intentionally by the white hats to permanently shut down certain programs, permanently fire people, accomplish different objectives in the dark that needed to be accomplished. Some people have said that when the government reopens after the shutdown, like, we're no longer going to be the corporation, we'll be the U.S. Republic. I don't think there's too much evidence for that. And actually, we may be looking at another shutdown as soon as January, because this bill that they're passing is only funding the government for another like 2 or 3 months. But the unfortunate news that just came to a lot of people's attention today is that they have slipped into the bill of refunding the government a provision in the appropriations package tucked into the funding bill that would recriminalize many of the quote-unquote intoxicating hemp-derived products that were legalized in the 2018 Farm Bill. The House is scheduled to take up the funding as early as Wednesday. If it passes, the industry groups said that nearly $30 billion of the legal hemp market would disappear. Now, I really don't like this because I have become a fan of the 𝕯𝖚𝖚 products, which you can't even find 𝕯𝖚𝖚 anymore. It's all like THCA now, and who knows what it is, but it's just easy to get, and I think it's good quality stuff. This was an article, I think, from The Hill. So, like, I just thought it was a big win for natural medicine, for breaking of MKUltra. As some of you may know, that cannabis is said to actually break MKUltra programming in people's minds. Now, of course, I also have to mention, like, it can be abused. These products that are on the market are very strong. Congress has said it's like unregulated, which I don't think it's completely unregulated, but we do essentially have like dab strength products that are available, I believe, with just like an 18-year-old ID, or I'm not sure exactly what the stipulation is, but these things are in smoke shops. It's not even in dispensaries. And now more and more states are legalizing like actual cannabis dispensaries, like not even hemp-derived products. But it seemed like progress. You know, the 2018 Farm Bill seemed like progress for the psychedelics industry and for natural health. And now, because of Mitch McConnell, who's literally like on his walking deathbed, they've slipped in just these few lines of verbiage into this bill to reopen Congress that are shutting down this industry that has been permitted to flourish legally since 2018, blossoming into like this $30 billion hemp market. And now, just because of this one little provision that the entire government is resting on, you know, everyone's EBT and all the military's paychecks and everything, they're trying to slip this in to like retract the legalization of this form of hemp, which I think is very shady and unfortunate. And I'm surprised that Trump is going along with this. But essentially, they're trying to reduce the amount of legal THC in hemp to 0.3%, which would make it virtually impossible to, you know, create a lot of these Delta 8 and THCA products that have been being derived from hemp. And what do you know, like, so I saw this as a possible explanation, which to me would make sense, but now all I have is literally like a name and a number as proof. But this tweet is saying that this is the tip of the iceberg and that this is the amount that Senator Mitch McConnell received from the alcohol lobby in order to reban hemp. And so that would make a lot of sense to me, that the alcohol lobby, you know, we've heard a lot lately about alcohol sales are down. Gen Z is not into alcohol like the previous generations, which I think is a great thing. You know, alcohol lowers your vibration, lowers your consciousness level. I don't drink hardly at all, you know, but, you know, in our culture, alcohol just has become like the go-to pastime. And I think it's a much more progress for humanity to switch over to hemp and mushrooms and other forms of recreational substances other than alcohol. And so this repealing of the Hemp Act in part could be the work of the alcohol lobby. And so I would have to confirm that, but it just seems a little bit random. You know, Mitch McConnell is falling on the floor half the time. Like, I don't think he really consciously like wrote this into the bill. And so it's unfortunate. You know, this bill might have passed since I've started making this video. I think they were scheduled to pass it through the House, and then Trump was going to sign it by like 10 p.m. tonight, but I got to check on that. But we'll have to see what happens. But essentially, a lot of products in the smoke shops may be disappearing, I think by 2027. Like the bill will go into effect next year. But we'll see if maybe they can pass something else to change that. It's really absurd how in these funding bills they try to change all these different laws just through the funding bill, and it's really not the way our Congress is supposed to work. And then it's like sometimes it's very hard to go back and change something once it's been in the funding bill. You can't just pass another law saying, well, reverse that, because like the funding's already been allotted. But it's not nice of them, especially in an economy that's hurting, to essentially destroy a $30 billion industry that was completely legal since 2018. So people are upset about that, and I'm not happy about that either. So moving on to SCOTUS, marriage rights, and the gay mafia. So this was a big SCOTUS decision that was made just this week, November 10th. You know, the whole, like, now I'm going to have to be careful what I say here about, I prefer to call it LGB, because I believe that the TQ plus IA is a whole different category. But as we know, like historically in this day and age, you know, it has generally come to be known as LGBTQ, at least, if not wanting to like add on like IA plus and all these other acronyms. But, you know, that camp would have really been up in arms about the MAGA movement had the Supreme Court overturned the same-sex marriage rights that were granted to them under the Obama presidency by the Supreme Court again. But they don't have to worry about that anymore because the Supreme Court has rejected a case that was brought before it that called to overturn its decision legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. So gay marriage will continue to be legal, and all those LGBTQs that spent all those pride parades and No Kings protests, like talking about how Trump hates the gays and how blah 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 blah, like No Kings, like trans rights, that they don't have a ground to stand on much anymore, because even his conservative Supreme Court appointments have upheld this ruling. And I could go into detail about which SCOTUSes actually voted for or nay against this ruling, but either way, the ruling stands. And so gay marriage will continue to be legal in America. But now what I wanted to talk about a little bit here was I was disappointed this week tuning into like Mike King on Patriot Underground. And like this sentiment is echoed a lot like in the MAGA movement, like not in the official MAGA movement, but in like the lower tiers of it, like on Twitter and even in the Q movement. It's like kind of on this foundation of like a very Christian, fundamental, nationalist, white, hetero, very confined ideology. And I see them, a lot of times like lashing out with quite a bit of vitriol towards the gay community. And I just don't think that that's really what QAnon and the Great Awakening was really about. It's like there's this sentiment that almost like wants to go back to like an Inquisition style of conception of sexuality. And I think that we need to be a little more open-minded. Now, me personally, it's like, I have no problem with LGB at all. When it comes to the T, I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea, but it's a good way to ruin your life and become addicted to medications. And it's basically a manipulation by big pharma. But at the end of the day, if you're a consenting adult, like I don't have a problem with it. But the way that some of these people, like in the video that I watched of Mike King on Patriot Underground, going on for like an hour about like the moral depravity of like gay clubs in Berlin in the 1920s and whatnot. It's like, give me a break. I mean, you're never going to get rid of gay people. I don't think you're even ever going to get rid of gay clubs. Even in Russia, which has laws against gay propaganda, which I disagree with, because essentially that's restricting of freedom of speech. Even they can't like get rid of gays or get gay clubs. Even in Muslim countries where they throw gays off the roofs, like people are still gay, they get caught and they get stoned and thrown off roofs. So it's just, I know it's a fine line of moral decency versus depravity, but like there's plenty of moral depravity on the heterosexual side of things too, as well as plenty of pedophilia on the heterosexual side of the aisle as well. But, I think that this war against gays that some people in the Q movement seem to be taking up arms to is a pointless and losing one, that gays have always existed. They don't just exist in the human species, but they exist in multiple other species as well. It's a mammal trait. Maybe even other types of animals as well, not just mammals, but it goes all the way back in time. And so that's why I want to talk a little bit about the gay mafia and the horror of the Puritan Anons. Was another subject in this video. Could have actually been the title of this video, but I don't want to go into too much detail. But the idea of the gay mafia, now this is like not necessarily defending the gays, but just saying how they've risen to be in such high positions of power throughout the whole world, throughout time and history, that to just say that, this is moral depravity and like this shouldn't exist at all is really just sticking your head in the sand and denying reality. There's so many things in this world that wouldn't even exist without gays. I mean, gays have contributed to culture, and there's a difference between having children and essentially propagating the human species and being gay and, having your life be more focused on evolving the human species and creating culture and creating entertainment. And that's a big contribution that gays have made to our world. And essentially, if you really look at what's going on in the world today and this concept of the gay mafia, you have gays running some major industries, including media, fashion, politics, Hollywood, and tech, big tech. And, this goes all the way back even to like the Roman Empire, when some of their most prominent emperors were bisexuals and gays. And even in the Roman Empire and Greek society, which is what Western civilization is based on, bisexuality was not looked at in the same way it's looked at today, based on Christianity and the things that were written in the Bible about how this is like not right. And so, I think in a lot of ways that this Vatican programming has skewed society into essentially forcing the main portion of the population to be, exclusively breeders, whereas the elites have maintained like this tradition of homosexuality within both the priesthoods and the kingdoms, within the royal courts, secretly. So it's like, this is a lifestyle for the elites, but not for like the people. And like the elites will practice this lifestyle freely, but the people will be shamed and, guilted and stoned and beheaded and thrown off buildings if they participate in this like elite lifestyle. So, it's pretty obvious, like there's a lot of gays in Hollywood and in the media, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow being two prominent ones. But the tech gays are the ones that really stood out to me most recently. And I've even found out about more recently, like Sam Altman running ChatGPT, OpenAI, Tim Cook of Apple, Peter Thiel of Palantir, and JD Vance's supposed like main donor, all openly gay. And now when we talk about gays and bisexuals, you have to remember that it's probably even like, I'm not, you have no idea the percentage, but essentially whatever is the percentage of openly out gays and bisexuals, there's a much bigger percentage of ones that are in the closet or have regular marriages and do things on the side or just have a completely secret life on the side. And so the numbers, you never really know how big the gay mafia actually is. But within the gay mafia, there's definitely some nepotism happening. I found this out working in fashion myself, not necessarily, didn't have to do anything to get a job in fashion, but it certainly helped being young and attractive to like get certain jobs in the industry. And like they have their whole like exclusive club scene, their whole exclusive Fire Island off of New York. It's like a whole exclusive like vacation scene and P-Town. So it really is like, people act like they say a lot about like the Jews having nepotism, but there's really a lot of nepotism in the gay mafia as well. And so, while I was mentioning ones that are not out of the closet yet, I would mention Bill Gates of Microsoft, which some people was saying that Melinda Gates looked like a transsexual. And so, and then in politics, of course, you have that's even more prominent of people that are suspected, but not necessarily out of the closet, like Macron and Bridget Macron, Obama and Big Mike. But openly now you have Trump has appointed Scott Bessent running the Treasury Secretary. Forgot that slide. So that's Peter Thiel, who is the CEO of Palantir and openly gay. And in this speech to the RNC, he was saying, like, I'm proud to be gay and Republican. So I'm just, putting this out as like, I mean, probably no one will even see it, but like to people like Mike King that are like condemning all gays and saying that this is moral degeneracy, like you might want to consider that like you have some powerful allies that, we want the same things. We all want to coexist. And, most gays don't necessarily interfere with straight culture. It's like we just do our own thing. And so This was an article from the New York Times called Donald Trump's Big Gay Government on the Town with the A Gays of Washington, who have never been happier to be out, proud, and Republican. And so that was about Scott Bessent and like a lot of other people that have fairly high level positions in Trump administrations that are openly gay, and saying that the Trump administration is the most I don't know, gay, safe Republican administration to ever exist. And so, you know, while at the same time we have, you know, progress and cooperation at the highest levels of this administration and this movement, there is this definite faction within the Truth movement and the Q movement that is just like, that's all moral degeneracy. Like, you know, I'm not sure, you know, Mike didn't go so far as to say like the gays should be like in concentration camps and experimented on and, you know, put in gas chambers. But, you know, I think the sentiment should be more towards cooperation, open dialogue, and understanding and accepting of like different lifestyles, as opposed to just saying like that's all like the Bible said it's bad and that's all moral degeneracy. Obviously, like I mentioned, in fashion, it's like all of them controlling everything. So that's Scott Bessent, who is the openly gay Treasury Secretary. And so I was looking into this a little more deeply to see like how much does this gay mafia actually control. And I was looking into like, why does every single city have its own pride parade? How does that actually work? So apparently those are mainly run by 501c3 nonprofits that are separately organized in every local city, funded by donations and sponsors. However, that was AI's explanation, Grok's explanation. I would not be surprised if there was something deeper at play, something going all the way up to like the World Economic Forum or some kind of national organization, you know, maybe some national Jewish organization or Open Society Foundation. Of course, you have to look at who all those donors and sponsors are. A lot of them are just major corporate sponsors, but like, why are these corporations, like, for example, like grocery stores and car companies, like wanting to fund a gay pride parade? That could have something to do with the ESG scoring and the World Economic Forum, like I mentioned. So there's definitely like a cabal agenda behind some of this push towards gay stuff. But like, I want to make sure also to delineate between actual gays and bisexuals versus gay pride and like this corporate involvement in it, and who's actually organizing these things, and who even owns like the gay clubs and the gay community spaces. Because yes, those more corporate forms of things can be corrupt, but it really does not reflect necessarily the opinions of all these individuals in the movement. And there's a lot of gay Republicans that are very much opposed to a lot of the more mainstream gay culture. And I think that's like what we have in the Trump administration. You know, obviously, and the majority of gay culture is geared towards leftism and Democrats and anti-Trump. But I think like we're in the process of breaking down some of those walls, and a lot of gays have become quite horrified of what these gay pride parades have become, and the overemphasis on the trans aspect of things, which a lot of them don't even endorse or identify with. Now, the gay mafia also extends into some very dark territory at the highest levels, you know, within like the Illuminati, Bohemian Grove, Fag Central, and Masonic lodges. A lot of the rituals get into some very gay activities, I would say, and, you know, who knows even the extent of it. But at the end of the day, you know, there is heterosexual as well as homosexual activity at the highest levels of the cabal, and like sex trafficking. But, you know, we shouldn't necessarily say that that's all the gays' fault, because it goes both ways for sure. So that's all I'll say about that for now. That beware of the gay mafia, because they're out there and they're in a lot of very high level positions. And, you know, it's It's not all good or bad, but I don't think that the Q movement or people in the Q movement should be devoting like whole hour-long videos to like acting horrified by pictures of like a gay club in Berlin in the 1920s. So, before we get into ZOHRAN, I want to do a quick little promo for Deep State Mapping Project, the website that keeps the new Templars running and funded. We have moved to dsmp.io. We're expecting to launch the new website any day now. I thought it would launch in July, and we've had delay after delay, but we're in the very final stages of launching the new website. We have a lot of our artworks up there, some of the newer ones, the seed oil map, which is in printed, small format and poster format. The Healing Web, a long time one of our best sellers. ZOHRAN map, which you see behind me as well, the poster format. The new financial system coming in with ISO 20022. The energy map, which we sell as a fold-out mini poster, all types of energy and energy technology. The original Q key, the classic Infinite Life Vortex, which is Energy Map 2.0, World Hierarchy Pyramid, Maestro Map, which I think I'm going to give this one an update soon here now that we have seen a little bit how this administration is playing out. You know, from this administration, from here upward was established history on the Maestro Map, including the Biden administration, the 46th administration. From here down was speculative. So now we know a little more. I mean, I think that the predictions were fairly accurate, but we know a little more details of what administration 2 is going to look like. And the deity chart, comparative theology of all Western religions. So those are some of the main diagrams that we offer. Of course, we have other sections as well, but check out this little 60-second promo walking you through the whole dsmp.io experience.
Truth seekers, are you ready to uncover the secrets they don't want you to know? At dsmp.io, we're not just a store. We're a portal to the unknown, prints and posters that unveil hidden truths, from ancient mysteries to modern cover-ups. Fill your space with tapestries woven with cosmic secrets. Tap into the energy of hand-selected crystals to awaken your mind. Explore exclusive packets packed with forbidden knowledge. Cleanse your body and spirit with products designed to strip away the toxins of a corrupted world. In the chaos of today, we give you the tools to stay sharp and to stay awakened. This is more than shopping. This is a movement. Step through the portal. Discover the truth. dsmp.io. Truth disguised as art.
So yes, dsmp.io. Don't forget to like and subscribe on this video and on the homepage of dsmp.io. Sign up for our newsletter where you'll be notified of all our new videos, product launches, sales, expos, and more. Our next expo coming up will be the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'll be doing a full booth there, teaching people about the Pleiadians and the Infinite Life Vortex, and giving a speech on that Sunday, the 23rd of November. So that's in Cincinnati, Ohio at the Sharonville Convention Center. And we will be having a Black Friday sale coming up later this month. So those are the promos for now. And back to the video. Zohran Mamdani won the New York City mayor election. He'll be coming into office on January 1st, I believe. So this was a shock that a Muslim Democratic Socialist won the election, but not so much of a shock that he actually won, considering the competition was Andrew Cuomo and another third-party candidate, and their current mayor, Eric Adams, had actually dropped out of the race because he had faced so much legal problems in the run-up to the election that he just essentially gave up on politics. So people are concerned about this. You know, there's hundreds of millionaires saying that they're going to leave New York because ZOHRAN is saying he's going to tax the wealthy and, you know, essentially be like a Robin Hood, tax the wealthy, give things out to the poor. You know, he ran on free buses, freezing rent prices, and I don't know what else, like just essentially giving like handouts to people. And the problem is that it's all empty promises with a lot of these Democrats. It's like he says these things that gets young people excited to go out and vote, and he's like trendy and young and in his 30s and has like new ideas and his TDS to the max. I mean, he essentially ran on TDS. People voted for TDS, and now people are realizing that they've actually elected someone that is going to like be terrible for the city and, you know, most likely turn it into a huge homeless encampment. But, you know, could he actually be a white hat agent? Could he be like a foil to President Trump that either was picked by the white hats, you know, by the same consortium that, you know, maybe had selected AOC and Ilhan Omar to make the Democrats look like complete asshats, essentially temporarily hurting the country in order to, in the long run, help the Republican cause? Or is he a true deep state plant? And I think some of the most revealing pictures are from like him with Alex Soros, because, you know, like I said, he ran on TDS, he ran on all these far left Democrat ideologies. So this is Alex Soros posting, obviously, a picture with him. He's been quite involved with this, saying congrats to New York. So proud to be a New Yorker. It has been reported that ZOHRAN Mamdani received $37 million from Soros-funded organizations. So this was not a poorly funded campaign. He kind of popped up out of nowhere. You know, he popped up like midsummer, it seemed, and was all of a sudden all over on The View, fawning all over him on The View, saying all the right things. But does he actually have a realistic plan to give these people what they want? I don't think so. I mean, I think that this man does not understand how a city is run. Some of the things he's saying, it's like he doesn't even understand the power structure in society. He's claiming to be a socialist running the capital of world capitalism. It's just not going to work. And he seems to be deeply in bed with the Jews. You know, Alex Soros being a prime example. Soros representing the Khazarian Mafia and Open Societies Foundation and all these organizations that we know have been wreaking havoc on society. Some have said that it's the Jews' job to open the door for the Muslims to invade and destroy Christian countries, which seems like this may be an example. But now, if George Soros has been executed, if Alex Soros is under control, and thereby making ZOHRAN Mamdani essentially a white hat agent, whether he knows he is or not, this could be a prime example of you can't tell the people, you have to show them. And that New York City libtards are about to be shown what they deserve. And if he is a white hat agent, he could be being installed as mayor of New York to make it all the more necessary for Trump to eventually bring in the National Guards and the Marines into New York City. So let's see, we have, you know, the whole world essentially laughing at America for electing this person as New York City mayor. This is an RT article mentioning first and foremost that he is a Uganda-born socialist. ZOHRAN Mamdani elected as New York City mayor. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo conceded. And yeah, I'm glad I got out of New York in 2014 when I did. As an example of his hypocrisy began on day one after being elected, when the day after his election, he was immediately began making further donation requesting videos. Like immediately after he was elected, he makes these videos requesting more money from his voters that he promised to alleviate their financial burdens. He's requesting more money. He's putting together an all-female, primarily Jewish female cabinet to help him run the city. So while he claims to be a Democrat socialist Muslim, which I guess he is a Muslim, it seems like pretty much like the Jews will be running New York City as per norm. So many things about this seem to be rigged by the white hats, to be honest. I mean, it's so over the top, even from like the font that he uses for his logo. It's like reminds you of like the Zoltaire or Arabic fortune teller machine. At his inauguration or at his election party this night, the night of this speech, which was his acceptance speech, this big projector that was behind him, you see with his logo there up top, at one point before his speech began, it flashed. I should have a screen cap of this, but it definitely did happen. It was reported in several places that it flashed a screen that said, "Trump is still your president," with a basketball. So someone hacked his projector, essentially, or, you know, not hacked it at all. This whole thing has been rigged by white hats, potentially. But what confirms that even more is that the White House itself on their Twitter account posted the exact same image of "Trump is still your president" with, it was like a basketball on their Twitter, I believe the same night. And so, I mean, if that's not a confirmation, I don't know what is, that, you know, the White House Twitter posts this image and somehow it ends up on the actual projector screen at his acceptance speech at the same time. It's like the white hats are really having fun with this one. So it has been said that any politician who smiles excessively is most likely lying to you. And I think that's a real big case with this guy, because like he's like all smiles and giggles in all these interviews and making all these promises about money that he doesn't have. New York City is already deeply in debt, is having a bond crisis similar to LA that 𝕯𝖚𝖚 has been talking about. So millionaires are fleeing, police are resigning en masse, and it will most likely be anarchy and mobs of homeless people soon. His acceptance speech alone was full on TDS, and he's essentially only being elected on a platform of TDS. And somehow New Yorkers aren't realizing that it's not the mayor that dictates the cost of living in New York. Primarily, it's the U.S. economy and the Federal Reserve, and the fact that our dollar has been devalued is why all these prices are going up so high in New York, which is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. So here's a little montage of him frolicking with the Jews, frolicking with the furry communities, wearing yarmulkes. I believe the night before the election, he was like touring a bunch of different gay clubs, like trying to cater to that community. So it's just very ironic all around. And this is a meme showing that these purple hair leftists say when Trump wants to shrink the size of the government, they're squealing and whining about no kings. But when ZOHRAN Mamdani says the government should be involved in every part of your life, oh, that's the other thing he wants to do, is have government-run grocery stores. The libs are just like, yes, daddy. So on a personal note, you know, I lived in New York for 11 years. And during that time, essentially, no one talked at all about politics. I mean, and this was during Obama's presidency primarily. And pretty much none of my friends or people I connected with in the fashion industry even knew anything about it or cared about it until 20 minutes before Election Day. Now, since then, with Trump, it's quite different. It's, you know, mass TDS is the norm. It's been promoted in the mainstream that even though you don't give a shit or know anything about politics, you hate Trump. And, you know, that programming was very effective on people. No kings became like the thing to do. And to go vote for a dumbass Muslim promising free shit is like the cool thing to do and so trendy in New York now. But they're going to find out how trendy it is when the city starts going downhill extremely fast. And so this is another meme just saying, a socialist got elected mayor in the heart of the financial world at the top of the greatest bubble of all time. Now, I guess that's debatable whether the markets are in a bubble state or not. A lot of people have been wondering if these AI stocks are a big bubble like the .com bubble in the 90s. So we'll just have to see. I mean, I'm still bullish on some of these tech stocks for sure. But the bottom line is that New York City already has a huge debt burden. And ZOHRAN Mamdani is not going to have the funds to enact a lot of the programs that he wants to enact. And Trump has said that he's not going to be funding a democratic socialist. And so it's going to be dead on arrival, essentially, his administration. But again, I believe agent similar to Biden, meant to show people how bad and disorganized a Democrat agenda really is. And there's going to be, a period of essentially punishment so that people will learn the lesson, and hopefully not too much serious long-term damage will be done after the demonstration of his failed administration. So moving on to the president of Syria. Now, let's see, we're in 1:07 right now, minutes into this video, 1 hour, 7 minutes. And so I want to wrap it up fairly soon here. But I don't have too much to say about the president of Syria, other than I find it slightly ironic that there's so many people that are condemning President Trump for hosting Al-Qaeda in the Oval Office, because they essentially don't understand that the CIA created Al-Qaeda. And I know that may be a shock because a lot of people think that, Al-Qaeda did 9/11 and we were at war with Al-Qaeda and this war on terror. But that doesn't change the fact that the CIA created Al-Qaeda. And it was even more obvious that the CIA was funding ISIS, which incorporated elements of Al-Qaeda. And that the CIA was obviously funding all these different Islamic jihadist groups that were attempting to overthrow Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And so when those groups actually did overthrow the Assad regime in Syria, it should be no surprise that it's our guy that is now running the country. And so now, we are friendly with him. And yes, he did some possibly terrorist-like activities to get there. But this is U.S. foreign policy at work. So this is actually a meme making fun of MAGA people, which I disagree with this, but it's just saying MAGA thinks that ZOHRAN is a terrorist and they're all upset, but MAGA thinks that this actual former, I don't even know if I would consider him a jihadist. He was an Islamic militant for sure, but I don't know the extent to which I don't know if he chopped off heads or whatnot. Now there has been some ethnic cleansing happening in Syria since this guy came to power. I'm not sure if it's something that he ordered or something that's just a result of a power vacuum and ethnic tensions that have existed there for centuries. I mean, I don't think there's too many MAGA people that are actually excited to see this guy as the president of Syria and saying this is not a terrorist. But anyways, he met with Putin before, and now he's meeting with Trump second. And people are saying, well, the mainstream is saying that only a week before his trip, and by the way, his name is Al-Shara, a week before his trip, he was removed from the U.S. Treasury Department's list of specially designated global terrorists, where he remained for over a decade. So he was officially considered a terrorist by our government for a decade prior to a week before this meeting. But, we'll see how well he can run Syria. He's only considered the interim president. He's not even a full-on elected president. But this was the first time that a former member of Al-Qaeda had been welcomed to the White House. In that sense, his visit to Washington was indeed historic. It broke long-standing taboos, softened rhetoric, and produced a few tangible outcomes. But to call it a new era in Syria-US relations would be premature. Deep structural contradictions, sanctions, Israel. There is an outstanding disagreement between Syria and Israel over the Golan Heights. I mentioned that actually in my previous video, looking at the maps of it. Like, Israel essentially claimed a decent chunk of southern Syria, which Syria still claims is theirs. So that is going to be a point of contention, as well as the Kurds and reconstruction. These issues remain unresolved. Until these are addressed institutionally rather than symbolically, the partnership will stay limited and fragile. Congress is currently debating repealing the Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act, which sanctions nearly all international transactions related to Syria. The Trump administration has suspended enforcement of the measures on a temporary basis. So, you know, I wish the best for Syria. Like, I hope it can become a more prosperous Islamic country, you know, like the other ones in the Gulf. But as we know, that, you know, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern basin is Baal country. I think even Syria contains like Mount Hermon and Palmyra and like some of these Baalist strongholds. This is where the primary ancient religion of human sacrifice between Israel and Syria is like, this is where it all started. So I think it's good that, you know, we're starting to have a more diplomatic relationship with them. You know, if Trump and Putin are getting along with them, it brings to my mind the Q quote of, what if Putin and Z are working with POTUS to bring down the New World Order cabal? And even though this guy has like a rocky past with some sketchy Islamic militant groups that were funded by the CIA, you know, he's essentially a CIA asset, in my opinion. And so, like, this is, I don't like to see like the overthrow of Syria by a CIA asset. This is essentially sounding a lot like the original neocon plan, but no one should be surprised that Trump is then allied with him, since he was a CIA asset to begin with. And let's remember that overthrow did occur under the Biden administration. So it's essentially the rogue military-industrial complex. Yeah, so that was the article. So finally, last thing I want to talk about in this video was this very strange Ozempic presser, where Trump was essentially laughing about the side effects of Ozempic, saying like, Bobby, have you heard of any side effects, when Robert F. Kennedy is on record doing talk shows talking about how terrible this drug is. So like, everyone knows that RFK knows that Ozempic has terrible side effects, yet they're doing this presser talking about lowering the price on the medication. Now, this is very similar to the Pfizer presser with Albert Bourla, where, you know, you can say that, oh, well, Trump's betraying MAGA, betraying the American people because he's working with these big pharma executives. But at the same time, it would seem that he's passing legislation and executive orders that are significantly cutting into big pharma's profit margins, which is obviously like the one thing that is most important to big pharma. So is he really helping them, or is he really hurting them, is a big question. And the dynamic here is somewhat strange, because like, the person speaking seemed fairly happy, but then this other individual from Novo Nordisk named Gordon Finlay passed out in the middle of this press conference. He wasn't speaking at the time, but he was a few people behind the speaker, and he literally passes out, has to be guided down to the floor by the people around him. They put his legs in the air to get blood back to his head. And you see Trump there. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? The whole press conference was cut short. You know, the feed was cut from YouTube. And so was this some kind of a sign? I mean, clearly when from Trump's introduction to this conference, they were literally laughing about how bad the side effects of Ozempic were without saying it, being very obvious about it. And then this guy passes out, which, if you're trying to sell a pharmaceutical and the executive is like dying on camera in the sales pitch, that's not good for business. Now, I did hear that the stock of Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly went up that day. But I think long term that, these medications are not going to be like the solution to the obesity epidemic. And RFK said so much. RFK did get his speech in the course of this short press conference. And so, like, why did this person pass out? Like, I've had a few different thoughts on this. One was that, was this the first live on-air public execution for crimes against humanity in a very underhanded, like, white hat, you have to decode it kind of way? Now, they're saying that Gordon Finlay did not die. He just passed out. He was fine after it. So maybe that's not a very good explanation, but could certainly be like a simulation of that idea. Now, my other theory is that perhaps this guy was so invested in this product that because Trump's claiming that he's going to reduce the cost of it by, down to like 10% of what the cost of it was currently, that he could be looking at such a huge loss that he's like getting lightheaded and passing out just thinking about how much money he's going to lose as a result of this executive order. So those are my like two theories. Or he's just old and he just happened to pass out. But it seemed like this was very staged. Some people even said that these quote unquote live press conferences that the White House streams on YouTube are not actually live, but they're pre-recorded and then released. And so if this had happened, and and I also heard that the press conference continued several minutes after this happened, and I didn't see that on the White House's channel though. So all I saw on their White House YouTube channel was the version that ended with him passing out and saying, "Press, leave the room." So if this is all pre-recorded, why wouldn't they edit that out and stitch it together with the continued conference and then release that live? It just raises a lot of questions. But either way, I thought it came off looking very bad for these companies making these Ozempic type drugs that everyone knows are very toxic. And once again, like with the standard white hat strategy of putting things on the spotlight, this definitely had the effect of so many people on Twitter talking about the terrible side effects of Ozempic, including stomach paralysis, vision loss, who knows, even the long term down the road, I'm sure possibly like cancer. These substances, these what do they call them? G2 or some kind of like G2, I don't know what they call them, but like Ozempic, they're derived from Gila monster venom. So these things are like derived from lizard venom. If you want to lose weight, there's much better ways to do it. It's like, have a little bit of motivation, go for a walk, go for a run, stop eating like a fat ass. Like, nobody needs Ozempic. It's completely unnecessary medication. And RFK said so much in his speech. I mean, he said a few things like talking about like, oh, it might be like a helpful tool and like getting people like over the edge, but I would say avoid it completely entirely. And I think like this whole press conference was really steeped in double meanings and like not exactly saying what people really felt, but having the overall message come across through the laughter and through the, summary execution of this big pharma executive. So last thing here, something that someone sent to me that they noticed in the White House's Halloween celebration. We've heard a lot in the truth movement that McDonald's has a nasty tradition of actually including human meat in their products, possibly like the remains of satanic ritual sacrifice, including children. And someone picked up on this very strange, very unusual Halloween quote unquote costume that someone came through. So this was when Trump and Melania were standing in front of the White House handing out candy to a whole line of kids dressed up in costumes. And this one woman comes through with her kids dressed as essentially like a McDonald's drive-through. Very strange, with actually kids in a stroller under like an order here sign. And so people are saying that this may be a white hat signal. You know, the white hats designed this costume to signal to people that the rumors about McDonald's serving human meat may actually be true. So that's just a little kind of like one-off thing to leave you guys with. And then this is a picture of the magnetic storm that hit Earth last night. There was a big sunspot that released a huge magnetic burst. And this was actually in Sedona, lighting up the sky red on 11/11, no less. And so, you know, people saw this as a very spiritual sign from the heavens that we're entering like a new era, a new territory. So that's it for now. You know, a lot going on, a lot of people losing faith, but I'm still feeling pretty good about things. You know, some things I do a double take, but usually there is an explanation when you look a little bit deeper, you know, like with that Trump pardon letter to Netanyahu, you know, seeing that as maybe he's actually trying to prevent another war, that, you know, give up Netanyahu on the petty charges, prevent a war, and then get him on the big charges, like things like that. It's like, I know people at this stage are making fun of the idea of 5D chess and jujitsu, but, you know, Sun Tzu Art of War is really a thing, and that we are in this 5th generation warfare, and it's all about deception, psychological warfare. And, you know, as commander-in-chief and like as Kash Patel as FBI director, like they can't just always be completely honest about everything. Like in war, deception rules. And, you know, would like to think like I'm typically trying to be completely honest about everything, but, you know, I'm a civilian. I'm not the commander-in-chief that's dealing with the world that's under decades of MK Ultra and hypnosis, and dealing with a population, both of the United States and the world, that the truth would literally kill them. The truth would put people in hospitals, like the way Q said. And so he's being very tactful. If you have the eyes and ears to decode some of these things that are being said, it makes a lot of sense. And the things that maybe don't make sense now may make sense down the road, like a lot of what we learned from the Biden administration, that, you know, none of us were happy about that in 2020 when it happened, and even less happy about it in 2021 when he got inaugurated. But in retrospect, you know, it turned a lot more people into questioning those Democrat policies of open borders and the trans agenda and all that. And so, you know, we had a moment of unity 1 year ago when Trump won by a decisive majority. And now, unfortunately, you know, some of these strategies are backfiring a little bit on our own movement. But, you know, he knows that it's all on the line for 2026 and 2028. If he doesn't pull this agenda together soon, by 2026 election, the Democrats will sweep the House the way the Democrats swept the mayoral elections in 2025. And then he will be impeached, and like this whole plan could be cut short. So it's all on the line. And Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, has said that we should really be beginning to feel more of the positive effects of the Trump golden age starting in 2026. And so hopefully that will be apparent by the 2026 election. We're also waiting any day now for Trump to pass some executive orders related to election fraud and moving to exclusively paper ballots nationwide, which will be huge in terms of affecting the election, as well as Juan O'Savin has said, completely resetting the voter rolls, forcing everyone to essentially resubscribe as a voter, re-enlist as in your voting district, because these voter rolls have been so corrupted. Even here in my house I live in right here, I still get ballot information and voting information for my sister, who has not lived here since 2001. And of course, she's a Democrat. And, you know, I just essentially throw her stuff in the trash because I know she doesn't want it, because she's voting in Massachusetts now, I think, or Maine. I'm not sure even where she votes, but she certainly doesn't vote here. But it's like, that's just one. Even in my house, like, there is examples of people that are long gone from the state that should not be on the voter rolls. And who knows if the Democrats somehow have some way of, you know, mailing in her vote. That's why the voter rolls need to be reset and reestablished. And so all that is in progress. But Trump really needs to shift the PR before 2026. And we need some booms and some wins. And so I think he's starting to know it. But we got to keep the pressure on, keep the decodes on, and keep the faith that this plan will come to fruition. And we should have some pretty good signs, you know, before the end of this year, even especially with XRP and the ETFs and the ISO 20,022 coming into full throttle. And so hang in there, and we'll see you guys on the next video. New Templars.
Truth seekers, are you ready to uncover the secrets they don't?
He could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the future of finance. Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. You'll find out.